Every year the Labour movement gathers in Burston to mark the longest strike in British history. During the spring of 1914, the young pupils of Burston Village School walked out of their school in protest at the sacking of their beloved teachers Tom and Kitty, who were being punished by the local gentry and church authorities for their socialist and trade union views. The strike lasted an amazing 25 years. Burston, in the east of England, is our equivalent of the Durham Miners Gala. It is a huge honour to be the keynote speaker, and this year that honour fell to Richard Burgon MP, the secretary of the Socialist campaign group. Let's hear what he had to say.
We've never had in our country's history an extremist far-right government, but opinion poll after opinion poll shows that is what would happen very likely if there were a general election tomorrow. Farage as Prime Minister, perhaps Lee Anderson as Home Secretary. And so I believe it's our moral duty, the task of our time as a movement, to join together to prevent a far-right government coming to power. And in my view, and I told this to the Prime Minister on Wednesday, we need to be clear about the current situation. We're at a very dangerous moment. The real risk of the election of a far-right government for the first time in our country's history. The only way to rebuild support is a return to real Labour values. And by that, I mean redistribution, a wealth tax on the super rich, a wealth tax of 2% on assets over £10 million could raise £24 billion a year. We need real action to tackle poverty and inequality. And we need a truly ethical foreign policy that takes a strong, principled stand against war crimes, whichever country commits them. Because a war crime is a war crime, whichever country commits it. A genocide is a genocide, whichever government commits it. And before the general election last year, I went to the International Criminal Court with my colleague, the Labour MP for Bradford East, Imran Hussain, and we presented to the Chief Prosecutor's team a dossier of evidence of Israeli war crimes that we'd gathered in a series of parliamentary evidence sessions that we organised. And the International Chief Prosecutor's team accepted our dossier of evidence for their considerations before they issued the application for the arrest warrant against the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu and others. It's so important. It's the great crime of our age, the genocide that is taking place against the Palestinian people. And that's why I went to the International Criminal Court. That's why I've been proud to speak at the national demonstrations for justice for Palestine. And I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has marched, whether it be in London, whether it be in Norfolk, whether it be in Yorkshire, week after week, month after month, demanding an end to arms sales and sanctions on Israel. You are leading the way in the mass movement, the greatest against the greatest injustice of our time. And the reality is this: we need an end to double standards. The government knows exactly what to do. I am sick and tired of being in the House of Commons and seeing sad faces at the dispatch box, angry faces at the dispatch box, being told they're going to remind Israel that it shouldn't bomb hospitals, that it shouldn't kill journalists, that it shouldn't kill children. They know what they're doing. The Israeli government knows what it's doing. Reminders aren't good enough. And you see sanction after sanction on Russia for its war crimes in Ukraine. Then why the hell can't we do the same in relation to Israel and bring sanctions that are widespread, sanctions to the extent that are needed to force Netanyahu to stop his war crimes? And at the same time, we've seen attacks on civil liberties which is why I was one of the members of Parliament who voted against the prescription of Palestine action in Parliament. And when you see the footage of the blind man being arrested, when you see the footage of the vicar being arrested, you know that the warnings that some of us put forward in the parliamentary debate were correct. But to turn to policy at home, the Labour government, in my opinion, is relying upon growth to turn around 14 years of austerity. Even if we get the growth we want, that won't be enough to undo the chronic underinvestment and the austerity and the attacks on our public services and working class living standards in the last 14 years. What's needed instead of relying upon growth is to grasp the necessary nettle of redistribution through a wealth tax. And I took to Downing Street a petition signed by 75,000 people in favour of that wealth tax that we heard of before, a wealth tax of 2% on assets above £10 million. That would raise £24 billion a year. But what did they do instead? They tried to balance the books on the backs of the poor and disabled in an attempt to try to save £7 billion when they could have raised up to £24 billion by that 2% wealth tax on assets over £10 million. And that's why on 9 occasions I voted against the whip to stand up for disabled people. And that's what we need. And we beat them back to an extent, and they had to drop up to £5 billion of those cuts. But let me make it clear. It's completely immoral. It's completely un-Labour. It's completely wrong to try and balance the books on the backs of the poor and disabled. We live in one of the richest countries on earth. The billionaires have more than doubled their wealth since 2010. In 2010, their combined wealth was over £250 billion. It's now over £600 billion. So let's not pretend that there's no money left. There's plenty of money left. It's just in the wrong hands. But what we need is an economic policy with the courage and the conviction to take that money and redistribute it to the people and the public services that need it. And when we don't do that, despair settles in. And that's the vacuum into which the far right have stepped. That's the vacuum which Nigel Farage wishes to exploit to propel him to number 10, which will greatly please Donald Trump and which I'm sure will greatly please the government in Italy as well. And so, we need to understand that our duty to prevent a far-right extremist government cannot be achieved without lifting living standards and bringing people together. You don't defeat reform by aping reform. You don't bring communities together by being a Labour Prime Minister telling people, and I quote, "Stopping illegal immigration is my number one priority." If it's the Prime Minister's number one priority, that suggests it's the country's number one problem. It's not. If you go around telling people that immigration is a problem, don't be surprised when they come back to you and say back to you that immigration is a problem. And don't be surprised if they also decide that there's somebody even tougher on these issues that it would be a better idea to vote for. What we're going to see, unless there's a real radical change in the approach of the Labour government, we're going to see a situation where we lose votes to the left but seats to the right in many constituencies, but also lose seats to the left elsewhere as well. It would be the height of political arrogance to adopt now what Peter Mandelson erroneously said many years ago when he said, don't worry about core Labour voters and the northern working class Labour voters amongst others because, and I quote, they've nowhere else to go. That's what they said in Scotland before the SNP won virtually every seat in 2015. And so all voters should be treated with respect. We can't take a single vote for granted. And so in a non-sectarian way, let's work together for peace, for a better economic project, and against the far right, because that's the only way we can achieve anything. And we can draw inspiration from these struggles of the past. And I was reading that Tom, wasn't it, the assistant head teacher and the husband of Annie, he stood for the Independent Labour Party in this area and beat the Tory. It made him unpopular. I also read in the museum that Lenin, amongst others, was sending regular telegrams of support to this strike. So I'm sure Tom would have been suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party if you're an MP now. And that's something else I want to come on to, if that's okay. And I know that there'll be some people in this audience who are Labour Party members, and there's some people who won't be. My message to those at the top of the Labour Party is clear. Stop treating ordinary Labour Party members with contempt. Remember who put you into office. Remember who leafleted for you. Remember who door knocked for you. Remember who lives in the real world and isn't forced to go down to Parliament every week, Monday to Thursday. And so that's why we need an end to the curtailment of democracy in the party. Because if the party leadership had listened to ordinary Labour members, they'd have got the position right on Gaza. They'd have got the position right on the winter fuel payment cuts, which I voted against. They'd have got the position right on the disability benefit cuts, which I voted against. They'd got the position right on civil liberties, and I voted against the encroachment and curtailment of civil liberties. Labour Party members across the country shouldn't be viewed as the unpaid postal workers of the Labour Party. Go and deliver these leaflets. They should have a say in what policies go on those leaflets. And they should be valued as our eyes and ears across the country. Because you know what? Parliament, and all too often the Parliamentary Labour Party, is often the last place to get the message that needs to be got in order to make a success of this government. I was suspended from the Labour whip for 6 months for voting to lift a 2-child benefit cap, which would immediately lift children in my constituency out of poverty and immediately lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty across the country. And I won't stop fighting until they do lift the 2-child benefit cap. I was given the whip back, but I think it's appalling that Rachel Maskell MP and others have been suspended for fighting against disability benefit cuts. That's absolutely appalling. At the end of the day, that's not what our parliamentary democracy should be about. And so, now that there's a vacancy for Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, I hear that the Labour Party National Executive Committee meeting is taking place tomorrow to set out a timetable. Now, that all might sound very dry and dusty, but I think those of us who have taken interest in this matter need to be very clear. The National Executive Committee, including the affiliated trade unions, should make sure that another stitch-up is not pushed through. And that means two things. Firstly, I hear rumours that they're going to be rushing through the MP's nomination process, so it's only a week long. That would be completely wrong to do that. It needs to last until at least the end of the Labour Party conference, so that Labour members and trade union delegates can meet the potential candidates, hold a hustings and hear what they've got to say, and so that constituents Labour Party meetings can take place where they can let their MP know who they want to nominate. So that's one thing. Don't rush it through. The MP nomination process should last until at least the end of conference. Secondly, the unfairly suspended Labour MPs should be allowed to cast their nomination in that deputy leadership election, because anything other makes it look like another rotten stitch-up. And when we've got Nigel Farage at the doors of number 10, we need more democracy, not less. We don't need coronations, we need proper contests where the collective wisdom of the labour and trade union movement from the grassroots up can be heard in the halls of Westminster and in the corridors of power. That is what's needed. Those who are afraid of democracy, you really got to ask, why are they afraid of democracy? Democracy is the friend of the labour and trade union movement, the friend of a progressive cause. So we should be focusing instead on things like improving workers' rights, which the Employment Rights Bill has been doing, but it hasn't gone far enough, in my opinion. But there is such a job to do. But we are at a precipice. But I've rattled on for a while because I'm so excited to be here with you all. Whether it's the Durham Miners Gala, the Burston School Strike Rally, or the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival, it's wonderfully inspiring when we come together. One of the things that got me excited and involved in politics was hearing about, as a young lad, about the 1984 to 85 miners' strike. And all of these struggles show that it's the collective bravery of the labour and trade union movements that makes a difference. We remember Tom and we remember Annie over 100 years later. No offence, in 100 years' time, people won't remember the name of the Under-Secretary of State for Paperclips who didn't dare to vote for a ceasefire against Gaza. Because what matters is not the positions you achieve, but the positions you take. And that's why the answers lie in our collective movement. The movement that's going to challenge the far rights in the streets, in the workplace, at the ballot box, prevent that reform government from happening. Because if we don't, we won't forgive ourselves. But I'll finish on this. Leaflets are available. Have a chat with that gentleman, see what you think. As I say, we should approach these things in a non-sectarian manner. I'm secretary of the Socialist campaign group of Labour MPs, proud to be a Socialist Labour MP. It was set up by Tony Benn, who I know came to the Burston school strike. And what Tony Benn said, he said many things which were relevant, but I want to end on a couple of his quotes. When we look at the threat of the far right, Tony Benn said, when you look at how governments treat refugees, it's very interesting because it shows how they would treat the rest of us if they thought they could get away with it. And let's remind ourselves of that. Tony Benn also said, we have too many socialist parties and not enough socialists, but I'll leave that to one side. I've got a lot of Tony Benn quotes, but I want to finish on this one. Tony Benn said about the purpose of politics. He said, the truth is, we're here not just to manage capitalism, but to change society. Tom and Annie, through their struggle, were trying to change society. And that's why the establishment tried to attack them. The labour and trade union movement, at its best, tries to change society. And if we don't change society, in 2025, we'll end up with the far-right governments. We'll end up with the globe being pushed over the edge of climate catastrophe, the greatest failure of free market capitalism, putting profit before people and planet, and we'll end up with increased poverty and the kind of society that we don't want to see. We need to fight those battles again and again, but let's make sure that this time we win. So I want to say a big thank you from the bottom of my heart to every single activist here, whether they're in the Labour Party or not in the Labour Party, whichever trade union they're in day out, you make a difference. Together, we can make a difference and create that better world of peace and social justice that we want to see. Solidarity.